not everybody knows the whole thing about Scott. So he was elected, of course, November of 2010. Since he took office in 2010, he has made strengthening the military, creating jobs, reversing our nation's fiscal course, and reforming Congress for a better America his most urgent priorities. Representing the nation's largest military district, Representative Rigell, and by the way, he doesn't like to be referred as congressman. It's representative because he serves us, the people. He doesn't like the, well, he'll tell you. Congressman's too elitist, and Scott's, you know, he's one of us. He's a businessman. And this is his first time running for office last year, and he got elected. So it's one of us is in Congress. So that's why he likes representative. But anyway, he is, as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Rigell is engaged in maintaining our carrier presence in Norfolk, which is very crucial, working with the state and local officials on important local issues such as Fort Monroe, which, thanks to our representative here, it's now our national park, I guess, designated, and of course saving Oceana, which is only 10,000 jobs. Get little issues. As a congressional reformer serious about reining in federal spending, Representative Rigell is leading by example. The congressman does not accept federal health care benefits or federal pension and returns a portion of his salary back to the U.S. Treasury. That says a lot. I don't know many congressmen, Republican or Democrat, who do that. Additionally, he has introduced as his first piece of legislation the Lead by Example Act, which provides that members of Congress would only receive a taxpayer-funded match to their 401k plan in the year when Congress passes a budget which decreases the deficit. That's a nice putting your mouth where your, or putting your money where your mouth is. So I like that. In addition to serving on the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Rigell also sits on the Committee of Homeland Security and Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, which is really important since we have a very growing spaceport, Wallops Island, in the 2nd District on the Eastern Shore. So that's a very key committee for him to sit on. Prior to his election to Congress, Representative Rigell was a successful small business owner and a community leader in Virginia Beach, the founder and chairman of Freedom Automotive, and congressman and wife, so you'll have seen the commercials before him, Scott and Terry, for Freedom Ford. Congressman and his wife Terry own several automobile dealerships in Hampton Roads. He was recently inducted in the Hampton Roads Business Hall of Fame. Representative Rigell served his country in the United States Marine Corps Reserve, rising the rank of sergeant before an honorable discharge after 6 years. He earned his BVA from Mercer University and his MBA from Regent University in Virginia Beach. In 2010, the Regent School of Global Leadership and Entrepreneurship named Representative Rigell their Alumni of the Year. Representative Rigell and his wife are proud parents of 4 grown children, Lindsay, who's here today, Mallory, Justice, and Shannon, and they're delighted to have 2 grandchildren, Parks and Reese, and of course I mentioned Scott's wife Terry is here as well. So that's enough for me, Scott. Okay. Welcome,
and Bruce, only if you're going to make me will I stand behind this.
No, it's up to you, however you want.
Just 11 work here. Okay, that's better. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is a great joy and a real privilege for me to be here today with Terry and with Lindsay. And I first want to thank Bruce and Connie. They are dear friends of ours, and just how they have stood with us and helped us to really get to know the full fabric of our wonderful community, including our Jewish community, has been terrific. So thank you. They're real spark plugs. If you put Connie on a project, just brace yourself. You're on a mission. And I certainly, Jeff, your leadership, sir, I thank you for that, and Amy, and your friendship. We appreciate what you're doing. You know, I'm just mindful of this, that I liked what you did. You hit it straight on, and I like to deal with things as they are. I've said things to different groups, and I've just seen faces go, oh my gosh, she's actually saying that. Well, your point about the Republican Party and the Jewish community, let's just put it right out on the table and talk about it. Overwhelmingly, we don't do as well as we should. And so I think what we're doing today with this group, the Republican Jewish Coalition, and having a chapter here, and in Hampton Roads, gosh, what an opportunity. And this should be a free flow of information. This is a respectful dialogue. If you're here today as a hard-charging R, Wonderful, you're welcome. If you're here as a thoughtful D or whatever, just not sure, welcome. You know, we're glad that you're here, and let's just sort through these issues. So I'm thrilled to be here, and they said, hey Scott, there'll probably be 25 to 30 people here, and I just look forward to when we can put another 0 on that, you know, and get the big conference rooms and just kind of grow, because we're having a thoughtful discussion with our community. I'd like to share with you 2 things today. One is look at this unique and special and wonderful relationship between the United States and Israel, and cover that relatively briefly, and also cover relatively briefly a very critical question that I think is on the minds of every thinking American. What is wrong with my Congress? And Representative, what are you doing about it? What are you doing, Scott, about what's wrong in Congress? So we'll talk about those 2. And the reason I say brief on each one is that'll allow us some time for questions and answers, a dialogue. And I love that part. I consider it to be the wisdom of the district. You know, where I can hear and listen and learn and kind of sharpen the saw a little bit before I go back up to Congress and make sure that I can properly represent. How can I possibly represent the district if I don't listen? Terry has reminded me oftentimes of the importance of listening. So here we go. Let's talk about Israel just a little bit. You know, there have only been, as I really think back on it, this over 2-year-long process of transitioning from hardworking businessman, husband and father and grandfather into public official. There's only been 2 occasions where it's just really kind of hit me. Well, I can think of 3 now, of just these moments where you go, wow, wow, you know, this has given me a wonderful opportunity to meet someone very, very special. And one of the first ones was Alan Mulally, President and CEO of Ford Motor Company. He called me one day. We had a wonderful 20-minute conversation about manufacturing and American jobs, and that was neat. The other one was with the Secretary of the Navy, Secretary Malbon. When I was sitting there with the Secretary in his office and just talking about our fleet, and he's giving me a cell number and all this, and saying, you call me, you know, the 2nd District is a big deal, you call me. But the first one, I believe, really eclipses those, and it precedes those. I was in President Shimon Peres's home office. Let's let that sink in for a minute. Am I name dropping? I absolutely am. Because it was just, and shamelessly so, and I'm happy, I'm fine with the video camera. My love for, support for, and respect for Israel well precedes my public service. And so to be in his office and to listen to him, and it was December of 2009, right, Lindsay? Virtually our whole family went, and Jay with the American Center for Law and Justice got us over there, and we were able to meet with the President of Israel and hear from him directly, firsthand, the challenges that are facing a very small and very critical country. First, of course, the threats of a nuclear Iran, and as we saw as well when we traveled down to the south, we saw the rockets coming in to Sderot. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I do my best. And I was there with Lindsay and her husband Oe, and just seeing just the literal threat. I mean, the rockets that continue to come in and threaten the children and the families there. Of course, we went throughout the country. And then the third, and this was interesting because this threat has somewhat changed, but it was the Goldstone report. And all of what happened there in terms of, now that's not over yet, because there are so many efforts to delegitimize Israel. We know that. And this was a principal way that it was being done was through the Goldstone report. And Jay Sekulow, to his great credit, he's local. Many of you may know him. He's also got an office in Washington. But as we went into the ministry, what's the equivalent of the Attorney General there? Anyway, we were there in those offices, and they are thanking Jay so much for the work that he's doing in defense of Israel. On the legal front, there is a deliberate, concerted, and really I'd suggest to you relentless effort to delegitimize Israel, to question that foundational question that we've already answered, and I think history has answered. And it's the fundamental question that must be answered. Does Israel have a right to exist? The answer is unequivocal. The answer is a definitive yes, and America will stand by Israel in that. Now, there are so many challenges facing Israel. You know, I've already mentioned Iran. Their quest for nuclear weapons is there. It's undisputable. The profound challenges that Israel has with respect to Gaza and its relationship now with Turkey is stressed, greatly stressed. Just about everywhere this little country turns, she's got a hard time facing it. She lives in a very, very rough neighborhood. And again, the challenges are really profound. What I took away from our trip to Israel, and I think my family would agree with this, is that there is a wonderful optimism within the Israeli people that are there, and a deep resilience to do the right thing and to be optimistic in the face of great adversity. I also learned this, that and Terry and I talked about this quite a bit, that the Palestinian issue, I think for most Americans we perceive it to be, there's just one, like maybe the issue is they're in Gaza, you know, there, or no, the problem is people are interspersed all throughout Israel. And if you see a map, and I'm sure many of you have been to Israel. If you've not gone, please go. And I don't assume that everyone's been, but if you see the map and you see how difficult this issue is of you know, the Palestinian issue, and my position is, and has been, is that a two-state solution, but on terms that are entirely consistent with the security needs of Israel. I don't think that anything I've really shared with you up to this point has really been anything profound. I made all of this clear throughout the whole process of seeking this office and the great privilege to represent you and your families in Congress. But I thought just to lay that foundational groundwork would be appropriate. Let me share with you what I think does represent, and I think needs our full attention, and that is the longer-term threat to the nation of Israel. It's interesting, and I'm going to segue just a little bit here, but it's related to this direct point. I was with our veterans yesterday morning, and we were talking about retirement and some of the changes that might need to be made in retirement programs for veterans. And my position is this: we honor the commitment we have to our current veterans, those who are in the military right now. We don't change the rules of the game midway through the game. But for those who are entering into service right now, it's entirely appropriate to think through and question, okay, maybe there's a better way. Maybe it's 22 years of active duty service and not 20. Well, when I bring up a point like that, you know what I hear from some folks? They say something like, well, that's not really going to do any good because that won't help us for another 20 years. And see, this is what's stunning to me in Washington. There's such a short-term outlook toward fixing problems. I want to make decisions right now that our children and our grandchildren will be saying, thank you for making these good and wise decisions. You know, this is how a successful business is built, a successful company, and I would suggest to you a successful country. Long-term decisions. I would never for a moment minimize the wisdom and the need to look 20, 5, 10, 15 years out. People will tell me something like, Scott, we've got 100 years of coal or something like that. I go, 100 years? Oh my gosh, we got to get on it. You know, that's no assurance to me. That's like we got to get on it and make some good decisions now. Now, let me tie it back to Israel. The economic and the fiscal trajectory of this country, and by extension, its ability to stand with and defend Israel, is at serious and material risk. to say that it is unsustainable fails to capture the severity of the problem. I submit to you, just as forget about whether we're Christians or Jews or we have no faith or whatever, or if we're whatever our skin pigment is, it's irrelevant. We're all in this together, and I'm suggesting to you that it's all hands on deck, and that we all need to be mindful of what a serious situation we're facing. Now, we can get through it with the right leadership. But these fiscal challenges that are facing America, inevitably, stay with me here, inevitably, military power follows economic power. History teaches us this. Look back at Great Britain. The sun never sets on the British Jack, their flag. Indeed, it does now, because they found throughout history they were unable to sustain their navy, and they had to contract. This is the same, listen carefully, this is the same discussion that's taking place right now in your capital. The retraction, the having to pull in. Now, I'm not going to leave you here today with some, oh my gosh, you know, I got here to be all depressed or anything. No, but it is our duty as fellow Americans to make a realistic assessment of our current situation. Only then can we make wise decisions. So I just applaud all of you today for just carving out time from this absolutely gorgeous day to be in here listening to the person who's representing you in Congress. Thank you. All of you. This is for you. So, excuse me. So this is what we must watch. We must make wise decisions now to get our economy going again, and really find ways to work together. I was speaking to someone about this earlier. Where there's intersection between what the Democrats are proposing and where we're proposing, boy, we have to have the wisdom and the courage to recognize that. I think it was like two circles coming together, and once they start to come together, of course, there's that intersection. And when you find that intersection, man, applaud it, run with it, celebrate it, because this track that we're on right now, and this I'm segueing into the second little part that is just very brief, but it's this. What's wrong with our Congress? Why is it dysfunctional? And Scott, what are you doing about it? And you send a business person to Washington. Here's how I look at it. I think there are three things that are taking place with respect to how we speak with one another and communicate with one another. You can call it our civil discourse, just the exchange that we have, our public exchange of ideas and values and plans and alternatives. There's a harshness about it right now that's hurting our families, and it's separating us as a people, a real harshness. I'll give you an example. I don't use, and I have not used, the term Obamacare. I'm just picking out one. There's plenty of others. Why? Because to many in our community, Obamacare, that term, right out of the box, is pejorative. It's personalized to the president. It's not to me. My differences with the president have to do with what's in the bill. It's not personal to him. If anything, it was passed by the Congress, and you can call it Pelosi care if you wanted to. So, but it's just a deliberate step that I'm taking in our office to make sure that we use words and ideas that are really sweet to the ear of the independent. Sweet to the ear of the independent. Because these are the folks who determine the outcome of elections. I've said every press release, let's make sure it sounds just like I was going to be talking to you here today. Not all revved up with political energy. The second part is this. I've noticed a pattern of the misuse of facts. You know, if you either ignore facts in business or you misuse them, you go in knowing that something's wrong, or you're not able to discern if someone is putting numbers in front of you that aren't good, you won't be in business very long. So my approach instinctively is to say, well, are we dealing with the right numbers here on House Armed Services? When people get on the House floor and start presenting numbers and charts, and I take them with a healthy degree of suspicion. Are these good numbers? Validate these for me. I'll share with you that both parties, on the margins, and I think some worse than others, some members worse than others, misuse numbers. we need to say, where do the numbers lead us? And really use a data-driven approach, and not use hyperbole to make our point, or ignore facts that don't agree with our basic underlying assumption. And finally, this, not questioning people's motives. It happens on both sides, and I will say, as objectively as I can determine, I believe it happens more from the other side. I do hold that view. I've been subject to these salvos, these kind of these howitzers coming in of, I've been on the House floor, and let's take Medicare for an example. We have put forth as Republicans, and I'm very proud of my party on this, a plan called the House Republican Budget. Now, it is a comprehensive plan. It addresses entitlements, it addresses taxation, and it's comprehensive. It's politically risky, but so be it. That's where we got to be. Now, my friends on the other side, I've been on the House floor and seen these howitzers come in. You don't care about the poor. You don't care about the elderly. I'm just listening to this, I'm thinking, no, it's precisely because I do care about the elderly. It's because I know that Medicare is going broke in 9 years. Absent leadership at this time, Medicare won't be there. Now, you may not like the plan. You may think there's a better plan. I'm good with that. But question whether I support the seniors. I share with people, look, my friends who are Democrats, you may care as much about the poor as I do, but you don't care more. You may care as much about the environment as I do, but you do not care more. You may care as much about our minorities, communities as I do, but you do not care more. I would suggest to you that as a general principle, the Democrats want to own the moral high ground. And this is where we often find ourselves as Republicans, up against this moral high ground, because they care more. No, indeed, I can go into any community. Some of our hardest are communities that are hurting the most. Inner city black communities, okay? Unemployment is, they say 17.5. It's more than that, friends. And if that doesn't grieve us as Republicans, it should. When we have a fellow community that's hurting that badly, but I can walk into any bishop, any pastor, sit across the table and say, Pastor, these plans that we're putting forth here, they're the best, this is the best hope for our young people and for our young black men to get back to work. Let me put it in car terms. I love our product. I love our product. I'm proud of our product. Now, we're an imperfect organization. Sometimes we fall short. And when we do, in my view, if the direction leadership is headed is inconsistent with, I believe, our core principles as Republicans and my personal core principles, then I vote against leadership. And when you do, you meet interesting people. And you get to see offices much nicer than your own. And you get to meet, well, as I've suggested, interesting people. I'll give you one example and I'll close and we'll take some questions. I have, and this all relates to Israel in some respect. I had deep, deep concerns about what we were doing in Libya right out of the box. And it is not personal to the President. Not in any respect. The problems that I'm going to share with you precede this President. Some Republicans presidents did the same thing. And the President did not seek the counsel of the Congress. There was not one provision of the War Powers Act. There are 3 conditions under which a President can engage forces like that. If not one of them was met. And he acted, and here we go. And I told my staff, I said, this is not right, it's unconstitutional, it's unwise, we don't even know who these people are on the other end of the deal. And to open up a third front in yet another Muslim country is not wise. And so I said, I want to present a bill that would defund Operation Odyssey Dawn. They said, sir, you don't want to get ahead of Armed Forces Chairman, you don't want to get ahead of leadership. I said, wait a minute, I cannot give my proxy to these good men. So I introduced a bill, almost got it done, came really close. Most of my freshman members were with me. Very telling, very telling. that the freshmen were with me. They didn't care. And then about, you know who called me after I made my impassioned floor speech about this issue? My scheduler walks in, she says, "Congressman, Dennis Kucinich is on the line." I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So I picked up the phone. He said, "Scott, great job on the floor." I said, "Thank you, Dennis. I don't know Dennis Kucinich." And he said, "Look, I got a similar bill. Would you help me? And I'll help you." And I said, "Sure." So I voted for Dennis Kucinich's bill because it basically did the same thing. So on the way out, on the way back to my office, after voting for Dennis Kucinich's bill, as the kids would say, my phone blew up. I'm walking back to my office and I see who it is, and if I said his name, you'd all recognize him. He's a good man. And I knew what it was all about. I said, "Hello?" He said, "Scott, so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you doing?" I knew what he was calling about. I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "You voted for Kucinich's bill." I said, "It's a good bill." You know, you have to kind of know why you're up there and know what you believe. And also, I think, understand where the district is as best as you can discern it. That's one reason I'm here. I'll close with this, is that I believe that there's a misunderstanding. I'm glad we're talking about our party generally. There is a misunderstanding, I think a misinterpretation, an unwise interpretation of what it means to be strong on national defense. I consider myself to be the strongest supporter of our men and women in uniform. But it does not follow, then, necessarily, that I have a bias in favor of what is now referred to as kinetic engagement. Now, it used to be called combat, and progressives used to be called liberals. So words get mixed around. But because I am a Republican, it does not mean I have a bias in favor of military engagement. See, that's what happens is, well, you want to be perceived as strong on defense. So we're going to go bomb the heck out of, put Tomahawk missiles into Tripoli. You need to be strong on defense. No. Strong on defense means making sure we have a constitutionally consistent declaration of war if we're going to put Tomahawk missiles into another country's capital. Being strong on defense means having a narrowly defined mission, understanding what we're asking of our men and women with a clear exit strategy. Now, notwithstanding the death of Gaddafi, which I support, I still stand by my position that the engagement, the involvement of America in that was unwise. Now, I've also learned, and I probably breached this, but I've learned in my short time in Congress that the shorter amount of time one speaks, the louder the applause. So I'm going to stop with that and allow some time for questions. So thank you so much for the privilege to be with you here today. I don't wear a watch, I should, but Bruce, I hope we've got some time for some questions.
Oh yeah.
We good?
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, sir, Jeff.
Thanks and a question. Recently, we asked you to support the UN Reform Act.
Yes.
And I don't know if folks know, but this is an example of your political activism at work. This is basically an act that allows the country to adjust its funding of the United Nations based upon the United Nations receptivity to Palestinian statehood.
Yes.
And quite wisely, sort of says the United States is looking at its funding because it's not keen on just unilateral actions by the Palestinians and the declaration of statehood by the UN. And we contacted your office, and you kindly co-sponsored that act, and I think it's going to have a tremendous effect, hopefully down the road, in trying to cut off what could be a really tragic and dangerous action at the UN. But
yes,
what else can the Congress be doing, if anything, to look at that issue and to help with what is clearly a big concern of Jewish folks in your district, to address this this dangerous move toward unilateral Palestinian statehood?
You know, I think we need to remember how powerful we can be, and I would say indeed we must be as individuals. Very few people can have a disproportionate and very positive impact on the course and direction of our government. I have found this to be true. A few people with great passion on a topic can really move things. So I would encourage you, now you're always most effective when you're lobbying your own representative, whether that's a U.S. Senator or a U.S. Congressman or woman. So, of course, push back to me. I mean that in the best sense of the word. Make sure you're on our email list. We'll have a piece of paper here, and it's not to, it doesn't mean you agree with everything I'm doing, but it means you'll be informed about what your representative is, how he is serving you. Second, if you have friends, you know, we have friends throughout the state, I would encourage you to build little networks, and whether it's through Facebook or email or a little phone tree or something. And Jeff, pressure on a district office. I get a report each week. I call it the pulse of the district. I listen. I'm listening. My radar's swinging. What am I hearing? What's going on? And I'm amazed at some of the bills that come through. I'm going, you're telling me we didn't get any calls in the district this week? Wow. Now, you can't be informed on each and everything, but right now, Jeff, you are wisely bringing up an issue that is at the zenith. We need to be right on this right now. Which is to say, I have no idea if any one of you have written Senator Webb or Senator Warner. I would encourage you to do so. I'm no longer, and I never did tell people this was an easy lift, I'm looking at fellow Americans saying this is a heavy lift. Keeping this republic on track, standing with Israel, it's a heavy lift. I make no apology for it. We are not on autopilot as a country. I think we've had it too good for too long. We have this little expression in business, bad habits are made in good times, good habits are made in bad times. I think we've had it so good for so long, we just think, we're America, we're on autopilot. It's time to get back and engage, write your senators, call them, have a thoughtful, respectful position, push, push, push. Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what your response is, or how you feel about what I saw on TV this morning, and that was John Bolton, former ambassador to the UN,
Right.
who claimed and who said he wasn't kidding, that Israel is definitely going to bomb Iran. No question. He said they're going to.
I don't doubt that he has sources inside the Israeli government, and I would not be surprised if over some period of time that Israel came to the conclusion, that very sobering, very, very sobering conclusion, that among the many imperfect alternatives that it's facing with respect to its own security, that taking preemptive action against Iran would be necessary. Now, I am not privy to the intelligence that both our own government and the Israeli government has. So I can't give you a definitive position on, you know, do I support it outright or do I not? I have a bias, sir, of
How
saying...
would the Congress, not just you alone,
Yes, right.
but how would the whole Congress respond to such a...
My view is this, is that there would be, this is probably the most sensitive topic that I can't imagine us talking about a more serious matter than whether Israel takes preemptive action with respect to Iran. So if my words are tempered, it's because it is a most serious matter. I believe this, that the threat from Iran is real. I don't think that's in dispute. It will be for the President and the Prime Minister, rather, of Israel and the Knesset and others, whoever's privy, they've got to get a pretty narrow group there to share that type of intelligence that they have. Whether it's shared with our government either outright or indirectly, or there are some things taking place, as we know, between our State Department and theirs. They may come to that conclusion. And I'd like to think, sir, that the preponderance of the evidence that would be brought forth after that, if in fact it does occur, would warrant the preemptive action. You follow me? That the evidence that they could present afterwards would warrant the preemption. It's a most serious matter to to preemptively strike the country. Gotta be really careful. Yes, sir.
Do you share the view that in the coming national elections that the economy is going to be the most decisive issue? And whoever occupies the center in terms of the electorate is going to win? Which means that each side has the rich millionaires and billionaires, I'm looking to see in this room who might be one, on one hand, and the entitlements on the other, and a sense of movement in the Congress
Yes.
to get a deal
Yes.
somehow. And so how does this come about? What is the party's position? Do you see yourself as a representative as being entrenched in terms of, I read the numbers of American corporations not paying any taxes. And I have to tell you, while I might be in the 1%, I found that bothersome.
Yes, it troubles me. Let me give you a quick, well, one of the things I have trouble with, I confess here today, is answering concisely. Usually we get in the car, I say, Terry, how do you think it went? Well, good, but your answers are a little long. But these are complicated issues, some of them. Let me be clear. Your point of, I believe, jobs, and not just the economy, but specifically jobs. I'm so troubled by the debt that people say, Scott, it's really, and it is jobs. And who is able to influence the independent voter is absolutely critical. And I would submit to you that it is districts just like this one. There's about 25 to 35 of us nationwide that determine where the House of Representatives goes. We're considered a swing district. This is precisely the kind of district that determines whether Speaker Pelosi is Speaker or John Boehner is Speaker. On the rigidity part and just this ability to get together, I was coming up to a town hall. It was a veterans town hall, and our district director said, Scott, she called me, she said, MoveOn.org is here. I said, oh, really? So when I pulled up, I immediately said to Esmel, who was with me, I said, stop the car, I want to get out and talk to him. And he said, are you sure? I said, absolutely. I got out and I said, good morning, I'm Scott Rigell. I know who you are. And I said, listen, I want to thank you for being here this morning. It was 7:30 in the morning. I said, I respect you for setting your alarm clock. You know more about this issue, Medicare, than most people. What's on your mind this morning? And I think it took him back a little bit. But he said this, he said, well, you're crushing Medicare and giving oil companies all, and giving it to all these oil companies. I said, well, you know, we have something in common here. I said, I don't like subsidies to oil companies. I'm looking into that right now. That was 4 months ago. And I got back to my office, and here's how I make decisions, and here's how I'm representing each of you. I said to my staff, I want to hear both sides of this. Bring in the oil companies. Let them tell me that these are all necessary, and how if we do anything, it's going to hurt oil production. I want to hear that. I said, bring in the progressive groups, the ones who say that it's all oil subsidies. I want to hear them. And these young, about 26 to 28-year-olds filed in from the progressive group. They said, we really appreciate you calling us. See, they don't get called by too many Republican offices. I said, listen, make your case. Go ahead. You got about 30 minutes. Make your case. They had a brochure. They handed it to me. And it's like all 8 subsidies right there. This one's $40 billion. This one's $60 billion. I started scanning it while they were talking. I said, wait a minute. Hold on. Let's look at this. I don't recognize these. Explain them to me. And over there. And I said, wait a minute, aren't these, this is just normal, this is what every cafe owner, every little Ace Hardware, this is a normal, that's not really a tax break, is it? Well, no, I'm just telling you, that's how the conversation went. Well, no, it really doesn't. Listen, don't do yourself a disservice. You got some good points here. I'm probably with you on these, but don't use hyperbole. I said, I'm a businessman. So we got her these others, I said, look, these are subsidies. I'll vote against these subsidies to streamline our tax code. Sir, if what was happening in Washington wasn't hurting my family and hurting your family, I wouldn't be there. I had a full and complete life, and I'm not a martyr, and I'm not looking for a pat on the back. All I'm telling you is that I'm up there for one, I think I'm pointing north. Anyway, I'll point this way. I'm up there because our country's at risk because we aren't listening to one another. And I was trying to indicate with that percentage story, which is true, at every opportunity, I'll push back on leadership. I've told my friends this, who are Republicans. Bruce, I've said it Saturday morning meetings. I said, listen, we're spending 24.5%. Herb, you're a CPA, right, sir? All right, stay with me. Math is pretty easy. I know Herb's with me. Historically, we've been spending about 19% of our gross domestic product on expenses. Right now, we're at 24.5%. That's a big problem. The math is really simple. Each percentage point is 1% of about 15 trillion, which is our economy. So each percentage point is 150 billion. So take each percentage point, multiply it by 150 billion, that's your deficit for the year. Let's look at the revenue side, where our Democrat friends are just raising the issue. Historically, we've been at 18%. Right now, we're at 15, actually a little under, about 14.7. Any Republican who doesn't say that that's a problem is denying reality. Now, we've got to actually get those two to match. And even when we do that, we haven't begun to address the principal, the 13, $14 trillion that we have in outstanding debt. So, I think we need to look carefully, and I know this camera's running, I'm all right with that. I think we need to look carefully at what happens at the end of 2012 when some of these rates are supposed to expire. I think we need to look carefully at that. I would, so that you fully understand what it means for me to be a Republican, I would suggest to you that the reason that we're not at 18 or 19%, see, this tax code that we're under right now has generated more than 18% for 2 consecutive years. So I know this tax code is imperfect and convoluted and all messed up as it is, will produce over 18%. The uncertainty that's out there, the uncertainty from the, I believe, the Affordable Care Act, Dodd-Frank has got our bankers hiring regulatory analysts, not hiring account executives. I know, I talked to our local bankers and I actually had an amendment passed that amended Dodd-Frank on that respect. And you just go down the list. I listened to the President when he did the joint session of Congress, and I'm like, please, Mr. President, when are you going to talk about it? He hadn't talked about it yet. He hadn't talked about it yet. Come on, it's been 40 minutes, Mr. President, please talk about it. Do you know he said nothing about energy independence? Look back at the speech. Look back at the speech. We have $500 billion a year going out of this country to places like Saudi Arabia. Now listen, it's one of those Saudi royals who did what recently? He increased the bounty
$1 million.
from 100,000 to $1 million for the capture of an Israeli soldier. Now, look, folks, we have to connect the dots in a responsible way. When we go to Exxon, not just Exxon, pick a station, doesn't matter. Some of this money, $500 billion a year, is going out to guys like Hugo Chavez. And you know what's happening? Let me connect the dots for you. Stay with me. Our money goes over to Saudi Arabia. They do not share our values. That money then goes to Pakistan. I've been there. Talk to the CIA. There are 1.5 million young people in madrasas in Pakistan, some of whom are extremists. Many of whom are extremists. They teach these young men that it is of greater value to kill an American than they don't value life. The madrasas take these young people, they put them in the tribal region, they end up bleeding over into Afghanistan and killing our troops. You can connect the dots. I can back up everything that I've just shared with you. This is the circular flow of money. This is why it's so important that we become energy independent. We have wonderful resources off the coast of Virginia. We have 3 great bills sitting up in the Senate right now to unleash the job-producing potential as we move America toward energy independence. And the Senate, which hasn't passed a budget in not 1900 days, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. It doesn't need to be exaggerated. It's over 900 days that Harry Reid's Senate has not passed a budget. It's required by law. I'm suggesting to people, look at the two houses independently of one another. There is a profound difference. This house has been productive. 15 different specific job bills are sitting in the Senate. I've come to the conclusion that Harry Reid is a bigger threat to our country than the president.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we take, because our time is short, let's take 2 more questions. Michael, go ahead.
Yes.
You know, you're preaching to the choir here. Obviously, we're all interested in the Republican side of the conversation, and I'm guessing that people who came are informed somewhat. I think that Israel and the Republican Party have a similar problem. They have bad press, bad PR, because clearly, if the conversation is getting out the right way, then mature adults would see the truth. And that's certainly true of Israel, and I feel that is true of the Republican Party as well. How could it be that the wrong side gets so much play, that the silly ideas, and I'm being kind,
Right.
are brought up as mainstream, and that the press is focused on that, and that we seem to be doing nothing, or virtually nothing, to tip the scales back to reason?
Okay, thank you for the question. The other day I had the high privilege of being in the White House in the Oval Office with the President and some others. You may have seen the picture, it was with Fort Monroe. Now, I'm pretty good about having a poker face. You know, I can handle a pretty big hit, you'd never know it. And I had to use my poker face that day. So I'm standing behind the President, he's like right here, and we are in a semicircle, Mayor Ward from Hampton. It was a wonderful day, and I was proud to stand with my President on this issue. And he was very gracious, and he sat down and pretty affable, and he said, okay, now, what we're going to do here is, he's kind of looking back and looking at us, he said, now what we're going to do now is we're going to have the press come in, and I thought, okay, the press comes in. I'd never seen anything like it. Off from the right, it was a stampede. I mean, it was 35, kind of all dressed in black, you know, the kind of eclectic, I don't know, media types, swarmed in, and they must do this fairly often. And, you know, I mean, boom mics, about 40 boom mics, every clicking and clacking and clicking and clacking. I mean, it was just like, it was a cacophony of imagery and sound. And of course, I didn't show. I was going, oh my gosh. The presidency, by virtue of the presidency, has that. We aren't going to be able to affect that until 2012. But, and maybe my answer isn't all that engaging to you, but it's so true. You can influence your neighbors. Facebook, give people, Bruce, I respectfully charge you, get more people to the next meeting. Get them to meet with me. You know me. You put it on my calendar. I'll meet with anybody anytime as long as the schedule permits. And I just want to have a conversation. You know, my whole point is to take a hard D. I don't look at him as the enemy. I look at him as a prospect. Like, come on, I got a great product. Just sit down with me and let's talk about our country. And I think it's done more one-on-one. And don't despise small beginnings. I have to celebrate that every day. And remember that I love what John Adams said. Duty is ours. Results are God's. We are just called, I believe, as Americans, it's our duty to do everything we can. So extend your sphere of influence. Reach out to those who don't agree with you. Invite the curious. Bring them in. And man, I'll try not to use harsh words, but we just want to circle or, you know, kind of love them. I tell our staff, love them into the family. Because I believe our ideas are best. And then we'll get the presidency. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
What are we, okay, we were talking about earlier if Israel attacks Iran.
Yes.
What are we going to do if they present the case to Congress?
Yes.
Are we going to back Israel?
Oh,
That's
man, I'm being as specific and provide absolute clarity as I can on this matter. But it would be, no matter how much I love Israel, no matter how much I stand with Israel, to unilaterally, I will not, nor would any American president, nor would, I think, any thinking person, just say, no matter what the evidence, no matter if I just woke up to, I mean, I need to see.
I'm talking about if they present the evidence that they needed to do this.
Yes.
Because we already know.
My personal view is, and now that we clarified that it's conditional, my personal view is that there would be an absolute steadfastness with Israel. Certainly among my colleagues, and I think to Jeff's point earlier, if you look at the track record of the Republican Party, there's been no equivocation here.
I worry about the president and the way he has treated.
I was making that subtle point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said my Republican
Yes,
colleagues, and that there's been no
because
equivocation. The
Yes.
lack of clarity on the president's part is actually, you know, I'd say is actually creating the conditions under which, an environment under which Ahmadinejad and others would feel like they've got more running room than they should feel like they have. You follow me?
Not
The lack
right.
of clarity from the president,
Right.
I think it creates an environment in which bad guys feel like they've got more running room.
There's not as much of a threat.
Yes. Yes, sir.
David, let's make this
David,
last
last
point.
question, David, you got it.
First of all, I want to thank you for being here.
Okay.
It's probably more surprising that I'm in the room than you are. A couple things. First of all, I'm sure you know about it coming from Armed Services, but this week the United States and Israel will have the largest joint military exercise in history.
Yes.
5,000 combined troops. So for your role in setting that up, we thank you. That's a big deal. And that cost a lot of money, and I'm sure they got to get that approved by somebody. So more than likely you had a hand in that, and we thank you for that. The special nature of that exercise is going to be on training on urban combat. And according to this morning's Haaretz, which I saw online, that the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs said that they hope to gain more on urban combat because our troops aren't used to it. I mean, the ones who have been overseas have been, but the majority of them have not, as opposed to the Israeli troops who've been doing it for quite some time. So
Yes.
that's going to be a huge opportunity. I think it's fair to say, a lot of the other articles, and there was an article in the Times the other day, I think the big worry in Washington is that Israel probably will not seek American approval if they would exercise unilateral. I think that's the reality.
And I don't think that
They didn't
I'll
in
be
Syria.
clear, I don't think that they need
Right.
to.
No.
And just as our
Israel
president,
has the
I
right
agree.
to self-defense, and
just as our president didn't seek
And
anyone's
preemption
approval
is
going
part of
into
that.
Pakistan.
yes.
We can't do it.
Yes.
We can't do it. So I think from that point of view, we have to be realistic about that. The interesting thing is going to be in the year when we leave Iraq, the no-fly zone is over. And that is going to, because that would have been a real conundrum for Israel, to fly into an American no-fly zone. So that ends in a year. And I think that that is going to
Right.
lay out some interesting facts for that. One thing that, again, I would ask you, as follow-up to Jeff's point, is there are multiple layers of funding to the UN. And UNESCO they just basically unilaterally accepted Palestine as a country, which is not part of the United Nations. And you can't follow every detail.
No, I'm with you. I was reading it today.
So it really does
With you.
create a multi-tiered funding issue, opportunity, I think, for the Congress.
Nicely
And
put.
thank you for your help in looking at that. Yeah,
Thank you,
opportunity.
David.
So, and
This
thank
is,
you for everything you've done.
Thank you. And this is the wisdom of the district. I would encourage you, and may I just even borrow a regular little sheet of paper, turn it over, a little typing paper or something. If you'd like to stay informed, we have a weekly report that I send out, oftentimes with a video, where I just talk about legislation that we've addressed that week. And please, thank you, sir. You can just give us your email, we'll sign you up, we won't spam you or anything close to that. And it doesn't mean you agree with me on every point, but it's a good way for us to stay informed. And we'll also make note of it that it's you may be more interested in specifically things related to the state of Israel and our relationship between the two countries. So, listen, let's do a couple of things. Let's commit to getting the message out that Republicans, we don't simply accept, but we embrace, we just welcome, extend the warmest welcome to those especially those coming from whether they're Ds or independents, and also work together to find ways to put, I think, a healthy bit of pressure on the administration and others to get job creation on the right track, especially energy independence out here off the coast of Virginia. I believe is a great opportunity for us, and collectively we'll stand with Israel. And that voice needs to be heard, so get on our Facebook page. When I talk about Israel, show your support, comments, those kind of things matter. Thanks so much. Appreciate y'all being here today.